The fourth witness. Yahushua was crucified upon the 14th day of Abib. This was upon the evening when the Passover lamb was to be sacrificed. Yahushua was the last Passover lamb, giving his life that we may live. Pilate sent Yahushua to be crucified upon Passover, John 19 verse 14. Now it was the preparation day of the Passover, about the 6th hour, and he said to the Jews, "Behold your king!" But they cried out, away with him, crucify him." The next day was to be the Sabbath, so Joseph of Arimathea asked for the body of Yahushua. Mark 15 verse 42 to 43. Now when evening had come, because it was the preparation day, that is, the day before the Sabbath, Joseph of Arimathea, a prominent council member who was himself waiting for the kingdom of Yahuwah, coming and taking courage, went into Pilate and asked for the body of Yahushua. The next day was to be the first day of the week, Matthew 28 verse 1 and verse 5 to 6. Now after the Sabbath, as the first day of the week began to dawn, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary came to see the tomb. But the angel answered and said to the women, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you seek Yahushua who was crucified. He is not here, for he is risen. As he said, come, see the place where he lay." The first day of the week is known as first fruits, and the children of Israel came to Gilgal and kept the Passover upon the 14th day of the month, at even in the plains of Jericho. And they did eat of the old corn and the land on the morrow after the Passover, unleavened cakes and parched corn upon the self-same day. And the manna ceased upon the morrow after they had eaten the old corn of the land. Neither had the children of Israel manna any more, but they did eat of the fruit of the land of Canaan that year. Passover is upon the 14th. The Sabbath is upon the 15th. First fruits is upon the 16th, which was the first day of the week. This places Sabbaths upon the same days of the week again. The fifth witness. This witness comes from John, when Yahushua was at the last day of the Feast of Tabernacles. John 7 verse 2. It was the last day of the Feast of Tabernacles. And at the close of the feast, Yahushua went to the Mount of Olives. John 8 verse 1. But Yahushua went to the Mount of Olives. Leviticus 23 verse 34 to 36 says that the Feast of Tabernacles begins on the 15th day of the 7th month and is a 7-day feast. We also know that the 8th day was a holy convocation. But what does Scripture call this day? John 8 verse 2. And early in the morning he came into the temple, and all the people came unto him, and he sat down and taught them. This is upon the 22nd. After this, another lengthy debate took place. Then they took up stones to cast at him, but Yahushua hid himself and went out of the temple, going through the midst of them, and so passed by. Now as Yahushua passed by, he saw a man who was blind from birth. Now it was the Sabbath when Yahushua made the clay and opened his eyes. So again, the Sabbath days are upon the same days of the month. Well, all these examples are great, but can we see between the months? To solidify this, being able to see from one Sabbath of a month through the first day of the week in the following month would prove useful. Does Scripture give us an example of this? Yes, Scripture does. Acts 20 verse 67 speaks of Paul and the disciples and what occurred after the days of unleavened bread, the sixth witness. But we sailed away from Philippi after the days of unleavened bread, and in 5 days joined them at Troas, where we stayed 7 days. Now on the first day of the week, when the disciples came together to break bread, Paul, ready to depart the next day, spoke to them and continued his message until midnight. The Feast of Unleavened Bread finishes upon Abib 21. Paul took 5 days to get to Troas after the feast. He then stayed 7 days. The disciples came together upon the first day of the week. Let's see if we can get this to work using today's calendar. The Feast of Unleavened Bread finishes upon Abib 21. Paul took 5 days to get to Troas. He then stayed 7 days. This is not the first day of the week. This version of the calendar cannot be correct. What if we position the first day of the week first and work backwards? So Paul stayed 7 days and took 5 days to get to Troas. And the Feast of Unleavened Bread finishes upon Abib 21. So far this appears to be working. However, the 10th of Abib is never a Sabbath in Scripture. It is always a day of work, as they collected the lamb upon this day for the Passover. The 8th, 15th, 22nd and 29th days, which were also the Sabbaths, are upon the wrong days. How do we know they were Sabbaths? Mark 15 verse 42. Now when the evening had come, because it was the preparation day, that is the day before the Sabbath. If the 15th was a Sabbath, the 8th, 22nd and 29th days were also Sabbaths. But can one have a Sabbath and a high Sabbath within the same week? Not unless Scripture shows this, and there are no Sabbaths upon these days. Also, the 16th is shown to be the first day of the week in Scripture. Matthew 28 verse 1. Now after the Sabbath, as the first day of the week began to dawn, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary came to see the tomb. This version of the calendar cannot be correct. Could the calendar which uses the moon be the correct calendar? The Feast of Unleavened Bread finishes upon Abib 21. Paul took 5 days to get to Troas. He then stayed 7 days. Which brings us to the first day of the week. And every other event shows in exactly how Scripture shows us. This is the Creator's calendar. But why does this month have 30 days? The moon's cycle takes 29.5 days from start to completion. Some months there will be 2 new moon days, one at the beginning of the month and one at the end. Other months there will just be a single day at the beginning only. This is the way the Creator's calendar works. So what is the difference between the Gregorian calendar and the Creator's calendar? The Gregorian calendar cycles using the sun only. That is, it does not use the moon. It is a purely solar calendar. The biblical calendar uses the moon to determine the start of each month. There are no weekday names either. It is a purely lunar calendar. There are some key differences between these calendars, where the dateline is, and the types of days they contain. The international dateline on the Gregorian calendar tells us when one day ends and the next day starts. It is a man-made line. When using the biblical calendar, which uses the moon, the dateline moves from month to month. So while it may be here this month, it will be in a different place next month. This is due to the cycle of the moon being 29.5 days long. So why is this important to point out? The Sabbath day cannot fit upon the Gregorian calendar, as the days of the week will never be in agreement. The other difference is in the types of days they contain. The Gregorian calendar has 2 types of days, 6 weekdays and 1 Sabbath day. The biblical calendar has 3 types of days. It has 6 work days, Sabbath days and new moon days. This is seen in verses such as Ezekiel 46 verse 1. Thus saith the sovereign Yahuwah, the gate of the inner court that looketh towards the east shall be shut the 6 working days, but on the Sabbath it shall be opened, and on the day of the new moon it shall be opened. And importantly, it does not break the 10 commandments. Why? New moon day is not one of the days listed in them. Exodus 20 verse 8. Remember the Sabbath day, to keep it holy. 6 days shall you labour and do all your work, but the 7th day is the Sabbath of Yahuwah thy Elohim. The 7th witness. In Joshua 6, we see the Israelites travel around the walls of Jericho 7 days in a row, with the sacred Ark of the Covenant. We know that they were prepared for battle, and we know they captured Jericho upon the 7th day. Which day was the Sabbath? Joshua 6 verse 11. So he had the Ark of the Lord circle the city, going around it once, and they came into the camp and lodged in the camp. And Joshua rose early in the morning, and the priests took up the Ark of the Lord. And the second day they marched around the city once, and returned to the camp. So they did 6 days. But it came to pass on the 7th day that they rose early, at the dawning of the day, and marched around the city 7 times in the same manner. On that day only they marched around the city 7 times. And on the 7th time it happened, when the priest blew the trumpets, that Joshua said to the people, Shout, for the Lord has given you the city. The book of Jasher gives us more information. And it was in the 2nd month, on the 1st day of the month, that the Lord said to Joshua, Rise up, behold, I have given Jericho into thy hand with all the people thereof. And on the 7th day they went around the city 7 times, and the priests blew upon the trumpets. The Sabbath was upon the 8th day of the month. But I have never read the book of Jasher. Jasher is mentioned twice in Scripture, in Joshua and in 2 Samuel. The eighth witness. In Joshua 5 we find the children of Israel keeping the Passover, the Sabbath, and first fruits upon the 14th, 15th, and 16th respectively. And the children of Israel encamped in Gilgal, and kept the Passover on the 14th day of the month at even in the plains of Jericho. And they did not eat of the old corn of the land on the morrow after the Passover, unleavened cakes and parched corn on the selfsame day. And the manna ceased on the morrow after they had eaten of the old corn of the land. Neither had the children of Israel manna any more, but they did eat the fruit of the land of Canaan that year. But where does it say that the Sabbath was upon the 15th day? The Passover and unleavened bread. In the 14th day of the first month at even is Yahuwah's Passover, and on the 15th day of the same month is the feast of unleavened bread unto Yahuwah. 7 days ye must eat unleavened bread. In the first day ye shall have a holy convocation, ye shall do no servile work therein. But what is this holy convocation spoken of in verse 7? The feast of first fruit. And Yahuwah spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, When ye be come into the land which I gave unto you, and shall reap the harvest thereof, then ye shall bring a sheaf of first fruits of your harvest unto the priest, and he shall wave the sheaf before Yahuwah, to be accepted for you on the morrow after the Sabbath. The priest shall wave it. One can be certain that the 15th was a Sabbath, as Leviticus 23 tells us it was. And he shall wave the sheaf of firstfruits before Yahuwah, to be accepted for you on the morrow after the Sabbath. The priest shall wave it. And they did eat of the old corn of the land on the morrow after the Passover, unleavened cakes and parched corn on the selfsame day. And the manna ceased on the morrow after they had eaten of the old corn of the land. Neither had the children of Israel manna any more, but they did eat of the fruit of the land of Canaan that year. But isn't that a feast Sabbath? The word for Sabbath is H7676 Shabbath. Which is the same word used to describe the Sabbath in Leviticus 23 verse 3. Shabbath. So what did this month look like then? Passover was held upon the 14th. The Sabbath was held upon the 15th. And first fruits was held upon the 16th. The Sabbaths were upon the 8th, 15th, 22nd and 29th days. The ninth witness. In Exodus we find Aaron and his sons being inducted into the priesthood beginning upon the new moon day. Exodus 40 verse 2 and verse 12 says, On the first day of the first month shalt thou set up the tabernacle of the tent of the congregation, and thou shalt bring Aaron and his sons to the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, and shall wash them with water. On the 8th day of the month there was to be assembly of the congregation, a 7th-day Sabbath. During the preceding 7 days they were not to leave the tabernacle. Leviticus 8 verse 33 to 35. And ye shall not go out of the door of the tabernacle of the congregation in 7 days, until the days of your consecration be at an end. For 7 days he shall consecrate you, as he hath done this day, so the Lord hath commanded you to do, to make an atonement for you. Therefore shall ye abide at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, day and night 7 days, and keep charge of the Lord, that ye die not, for so I am commanded. Leviticus 9 tells us that at the end of 8 days they held a holy convocation. And it came to pass on the 8th day that Moses called Aaron and his sons and the elders of Israel. And he said unto Aaron, Take thee a young calf for a sin offering, and a ram for a burnt offering, without blemish, and offer them before the Lord. And unto the children of Israel thou shalt speak, saying, Take ye a kid of the goats for a sin offering, and a calf and a lamb, both of the first year, without blemish, for a burnt offering. Leviticus 9 tells us what day this was. And they brought that which Moses had commanded before the tabernacle of the appointed time. And all the congregation drew near, and stood before